Good morning. Thanks to everyone who's joining us from around the world. We are fortunate to have such a great audience participation, and above all, to have three of the eight people who have bounties on their heads from Hong Kong with us today, from Australia, from England, and from the United States. This is one of those events that, of course, one never wants to take part in, let alone to host. But we think it's necessary to keep calling out Chief Executive John Lee and the rest of the Hong Kong government, the enablers of the Chinese Communist Party's continuing, deepening repression against the people of Hong Kong. It's appalling that we have bounties on the heads of 8 overseas activists, 8 people who in any free, open, liberal society would be regarded as among the best and the brightest in their communities. And instead, they're being hunted to the ends of the earth like street rats, John Lee says. I think this is really, really disturbing language. So, of course, at the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation, we support the cause of freedom in Hong Kong. We support political prisoners in Hong Kong, and we support activists working abroad for Hong Kong's freedom, democracy, and for holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable for its abuses, and also asking it to keep the promises, demanding that China keep the promises it made to the people of Hong Kong and to the world in the run-up to the 1997 takeover of Hong Kong and in the aftermath. And China has fallen down dramatically in that. So I see this conversation as an important opportunity to hear from those who have been targeted and to try to give those of you watching, others around the world, what it's like to be going around with a fatwa, a Chinese communist fatwa on your head. We also need to make John Lee and others in the Hong Kong government realize that it's not business as usual anymore. So we are working to ensure that John Lee, who is a sanctioned official subject to U.S. sanctions, is not invited to the APEC leaders meeting in San Francisco, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum that meets every year. We don't think John Lee should get a waiver to come to the United States. And this bounty and the language that he's using has redoubled our determination to see that he's not invited to San Francisco. We're going to be doing more to safeguard and defend those targeted by the Hong Kong government overseas. And of course, doing what we can to help those in Hong Kong to the extent that's safe. We need to shift the risk so that the Hong Kong government realizes that the individuals who are involved with persecuting people like the 8 activists, particularly the 3 that we have here, are themselves subject to risk, that they could face sanctions, that their life will not be business as normal. No more apartments in London, no more shopping trips to the U.S. And I think we need to continue to work to ensure that those fleeing Hong Kong can find safe haven and are safe when they come to open, free societies like Australia, the United States, and England. So I was encouraged last week to see that the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee moved forward with legislation that would restrict the Hong Kong economic and trade offices, which unfortunately in the United States and elsewhere have become outposts for wolf warrior diplomacy and have been used to harass and intimidate dissidents and, in fact, anyone who's questioning the policies of the Hong Kong government. So let me introduce our 3 speakers. First, we'll hear from Anna Kwok, who's the Executive Director of Hong Kong Democracy Council. Delighted that Anna's with us. She and HKDC, under her leadership and other longtime activists, has emerged as a leading force in activism, not only in the United States, but around the world, pioneering the successful Hong Kong Summit last year, version 2 about to come up. Before I turn over to Anna, let me just briefly mention our other 2 speakers. We have Finn Lau, who's the founder of Hong Kong Liberty, based in London. We were very happy to work with Finn and in the UK version of the Hong Kong Summit earlier this year. And finally, last but not least, but certainly the furthest away from me, is Ted Hui, who's now in Australia. Ted escaped Hong Kong under dramatic circumstances in the latter part of 2020. it's a very good thing he did, because he certainly would be in jail. He would have spent most of the last 3 years in jail with, like other jailed people, on no sign of any kind of release. So really happy to have you here, Ted. Very grateful that you were able to get out of Hong Kong. So let me go first to Anna. So tell us personally how it feels. You're in the United States. It's a free place. You have an asylum application pending, and yet you have a bounty on your head. How does it feel to essentially, have a fatwa against you, and how has that changed how you do your advocacy?
Thanks, Mark, for having me here and asking that question. Honestly, I'm still digesting, the reality of what it means to have a bounty on your head imposed by a government that I'm not, in the country. So it's actually a bit weird because I think at first a lot of people would dismiss it as, an innocent joke, right? Not so innocent, but actually a joke from the government that they may be overthinking the territorial power they have, and and they may be trying to apply the national security law overseas. But actually, after more reflection, I think there are actually very real concerns for our personal safety, and it's actually not only to the eight of us, but also to the eight, community network that have supported us and worked with us, over the years. Because what I see essentially is that the Hong Kong government wants to make an example out of the eight of us, to be able to say that, oh, if you do try to advocate for Hong Kong, even if you're overseas and even when you're overseas, you would still be subjected to this sort of arrest, intimidation, and just a lot of very high cost and high stake prices. And that's why I think they're trying to send a message to those who are still fighting in the diaspora and trying to silence those into inaction. And I think another aspect of it is that the Hong Kong government, and I think the Chinese government might be actually trying to see how far they can go. They're testing the water to see how the transnational repression can carry out overseas. And I say that because I think, in recent months, we have seen the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government trying to engage more and more with, the United States and other foreign governments. And in doing so, they're actually trying to see if the human rights abuses they have domestically and now internationally would translate into a price they have to pay in terms of diplomatic engagement. So this is actually where I do want to send a message to, foreign governments, including the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, that they have to treat this very seriously, because this is an attempt to transnational repression that must be handled very carefully. Now, I'm delighted and I was happy to see that the three governments did try to come up with a statement, very quickly on the day. It was only, within 24 hours that all the governments have spoken. But still, there's a long way to go. We have seen a lot of assault cases in the past few years in the US and UK and Australia. And most of them were actually waged by, Chinese nationalists who were not, directly state agents or directly instructed by the states. But because they have that mob mentality, they continue to create a safety concern for a lot of our activists. And that's something I think we have to remember. And we have to remember not only the eight of us. Again, it's those who are not seen who should be protected and remember, but not really we who have been seen, under the spotlight.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I think these are a couple of points I want to underscore. I do think that there's an attempt to see how much the international community will swallow. We think that these bounties came out right as Janet Yellen was preparing to get on the plane to
Mhm.
Beijing. So U.S. Secretary Treasury is going. She's trying to reset the relationship, trying to move forward. Do we see any signs of dovishness on the part of the Chinese? What we see is John Lee, kind of sort of independent actor in the special administrative region, coming out with these bounties. I don't think that's an accident. I think it's really important what Anna says about testing the international community. I also think the issue of personal safety is really important. Remember, Salman Rushdie had a fatwa on his head for more than 3 decades before seemingly a kind of lone wolf attacker, but clearly encouraged by the fatwa, stabbed him and almost killed him. And sadly, I think this is a good segue to turn to Finn Lau, who in fact has been attacked in London and knows firsthand what harassment is like. So, Finn, what's it like to now have this bounty on your head, and has that changed how you're thinking about your activism or about your concerns for your personal safety?
Well, I would say has been a long journey since I got my first so-called arrest warrant under the same Draconian NSL, National Security Law in Hong Kong, since 2020. At that time, I was quite shocked. I was a little bit panicking, thinking about how to proceed this kind of so-called shocking news, how to continue to fight. After 3 years, I think I get used to that kind of pressure, that kind of risk of transnational repression. After all, I was attacked in London. Although I could not 100% verify those people's identity, but still, I would say that it's highly likely related to the CCP. I was beaten to almost near death in London. But then, well, it was a long journey, and then I decided to go fully prepared to continue the fight. And this is the second or maybe the third arrest warrant I have got from the Hong Kong authorities and the Chinese Communist Party. So this time, I am not too surprised. On the other hand, well, this is first time that the Hong Kong authorities they dare to issue explicit 1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on different people, same as Anna has said. I would say that this is just a symbolic move. We should not just focusing on the 8 activists who got wounded and be issued against a bounty. Rather, we should look at the whole picture, look at how transnational repression is affecting Hong Kongers overseas, or even maybe beyond, like Taiwanese, like Uyghurs, or even Tibetans. So that is the implication. So I would say that yes, the risk of adoption and physical harassment escalated after the issue of new bounty, but still we have to continue to fight. And to me, the bounty doesn't change really much because I would say that many of us, or maybe all of us, we will continue to fight. It will not deter myself from continuing to advocate for Hong Kong. So this is perhaps maybe a first-hand painful experience that Hong Kongers should share with the world. And this is the way that we could drive some positive changes towards China or even the region.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. I mean, there has been this transnational repression. I mean, we've seen well-documented cases in the U.S. of, thanks to the U.S. Justice Department, exposing the networks of Chinese spies and agents and Americans working with them to harass mainlanders. This has been going on for many years. And I think the bounty just makes it much more explicit. And I think it's something that's easier for outsiders to understand. Ted, you're in Australia. You managed to elude the grasp of the Hong Kong authorities to get out. So they have wanted you. They've been very, I think, upset with you and your activities and your ability to, as I said, escape their grasp almost 3 years ago. How does the bounty change how you're thinking, both about your personal safety and about your activism?
From a very personal point of view, I don't feel anything about the bounty. So I'm one of the 8 among the 8 who are more experienced with arrest warrants. I had it from the first day, from day one, and I have like over 20 charges against me. So I'm very used to it. So the first reaction when I received the news, oh, you have a bounty on your head, I was like, oh, what? Not again. And I scoffed and I laughed through it. So no, it cannot change my life at all. My way of living. It cannot change the way I am doing my lobbying work, my advocacy work for Hong Kong and democracy. But at the same time, ironically, it gives me a lot of public attention. So it gives me fuel so that I can talk to media more, and I take this opportunity to talk to the world. I take like over 50 interview requests. I make use of this opportunity to say to China, with an attitude, hey, I don't give a damn. So you can't harm me, and you're giving me more energy. So I think this is exactly the attitude that I want Hong Kongers to take, and I want my international allies, free countries leaders to take. Hey, we don't give a damn, and you can't change me. And this is the value that we believe in, and we won't change. And I'm growing stronger against you now.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's great. We don't give a damn. I think and we're going to get stronger. And this allows us to show the international community the reality of what Hong Kong activists and really any Tibetans, Uyghurs, Han Chinese, anyone who's opposing the CCP. The bounty just makes crystal clear to an outsider who may not know as much about the reality of what John Lee and the Chinese Communist Party think about freedom. I mean, here we have people who've hundreds of thousands of Hong Kongers who've moved to what they think are open, free, democratic, and safe countries. And the CCP and John Lee are saying we're going to hunt you down like street rats. I mean, it's outrageous. So let me jump back to Finn, and then we'll go through, give others a chance to get in as well. But what do you think the events of the last few weeks, particularly the bounty, but there have been other issues as well, what do they tell us about the state of freedom in Hong Kong today? And if you'd like, perhaps you'd like to reflect on how far freedoms have declined in the 3 years and 2 weeks since the national security laws come in. Finn?
Well, I would say since 2020, we have witnessed civil liberties like freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, press freedom, academic freedom, all sorts of freedoms are being dismantled in Hong Kong. So that is the, hard truth or the reality that we have to face right now. On the other hand, I would say that we have the collapsing judiciary system in Hong Kong. We don't have any kind of rule of law because of, the NSL as well as other, I would say, judiciary system problem going on. On the other hand, we don't have any kinds of autonomy that has been stipulated in this Sino-British Joint Declaration, for which, Hong Kong should be guaranteed with at least 50 years of autonomy. But right now, even the US government, they recognize that, Hong Kong no longer enjoy autonomy. On the other hand, the UK government also recognize that in their, half-yearly report repeatedly. So that's how everything is going on. And I think that, everything is getting worse. However, there is some kind of hope, I would say, because after 2019, the world has changed. We are shifting from engagement policy towards more, I would say, more diversified, more, so-called hawkish policy towards China. We have seen some kind of so-called de-risk approach from the EU countries. On the other hand, we have de-risk approach by the US government. So I hope that maybe with Hong Kong as a wake-up call, then UK government and other government will take a more hawkish stand towards China. So that's what I hope.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put. And again, as you say, it makes it crystal clear, and it makes it clear what the stakes are. I mean, when you've got the chief executive of what's supposed to be a special administrative region, I think you're very right to emphasize this, Ted. The Chinese promised that Hong Kong would be able to not only have its existing freedoms for the next 50 years of Chinese rule, but that it would have more freedom, that we'd move towards universal suffrage, popular vote for the city's chief executive and for the legislative council. And instead, we're seeing the kind of repression that's more akin to Tibet and the Uyghurs. So I think it really shows the world that China can't be trusted to keep its promises. This was a treaty filed at the United Nations, the Sino-British Declaration. So again, it makes things crystal clear. Finn, I'm sorry, Ted, what are your comments on this?
Yeah, what I want the world to see is that China is exporting authoritarianism outwards. It's extending its authoritarian arms to the world. It's extending it to everyone in the globe. So that China has become a threat to the world, a continuous threat, and definitely not a friend to free countries. So leaders of free countries should know about this. So I don't like to describe Hong Kong's situation as eroding freedom and implying that there's a little freedom still enjoyed by Hong Kongers. No, it's not the truth. It's not only dropped to zero, it's dropped to the negative. So our bounty on our head is like a fine example how authoritarian regimes can go to the point that's so crazy, to the extreme. So the level of freedom. So if you look at Hong Kong's, we lost all our democratic rights in the parliament. So we lost all the judicial independence in the courts. So we cannot rely on courts. We lost all the civil rights in the streets. We can't take it to the streets. We can't do anything at all. So now Hong Kong needs international support. Hong Kongers themselves can be quite powerless. So I hope that the international communities recognize this and so lend a helping hand.
Yeah, Anna, what comments would you make to add to what the events of the last few weeks tell us about Hong Kong and what's happened in the last 3 years, which is obviously, as everybody knows, very, very bad, crazy, I think Ted is right to say. I think Anna might be having some tech difficulties. Right. Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, there might be a bit of lag time, but please bear with me. So I think one important lesson I've learned from seeing and witnessing all the freedoms that the Chinese government and Hong Kong government have taken away from us is that part of their important tactics is to break trust between people. They like to sow mistrust. They like to break up networks, break up communities. And, they just keep adding to the cost for Hong Kongers around the world to stay connected to each other. And that's why you see them, persecuting people who are simply sharing a post on Facebook, commenting something on Facebook, because they are scared what might happen if Hong Kongers are able to maintain this sort of global network of Hong Kongers, despite having very draconian national security law implemented inside Hong Kong. And I think you can also see that with the kind of, mad and insane arresting in Hong Kong over the past year. And, this is something very concerning. And this is something we have always seen inside of China. And I think it's important for Hong Kongers to recognize the fact that the Hong Kong government is actively sowing mistrust as a tactic. And for us, we really need to remember and maintain that human connection, that genuine trust and genuine bonding Hong Kongers had in 2019. Now I know it's very difficult because we are, separated in different countries. We, some of us can't travel even for.
Hey, let me jump in. Here while I'm sure Hannah will be back. I think this is a really important point because I think there's sometimes concern that, diaspora movements do fracture. I think it's incredible how the Hong Kong movement has held together overseas. We have a few 100,000 active Hong Kongers. And I don't think we've ever maybe in history seen a diaspora movement quite like this, thanks to the possibilities that technology holds. I mean, we're having this meeting right now, that's very transnational, right? We've got people from 3 continents. And I think it's a really strong and powerful diaspora movement. But Anna's right. I mean, the CCP is brilliant at promoting fractures. People will testify against other people in trials, etc. There's a lot of pressure being put on people, but I think it's quite extraordinary the degree to which Hong Kongers have really hung together. Anna's back. You want to continue? I was just underscoring your point about how powerful and in a way it's remarkable how united the diaspora movement has stayed. I mean, it's natural that there are going to be tensions, but I actually think it's been very powerful, and the CCP in a way is continuing to strengthen us, I think, and technology gives us possibilities we didn't have before.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think actually what the Chinese Communist Party has always been very worried about is really the power of the people. You know,
Mhm.
it sounds very cliche and simple, but I really think it's simple as that because you see that, you know, the way they are going after us is actually not so much about, you know, the eight of us, but actually about, you know, those who think support us and those who think, you know, give us strength. And I think, you know, they're right that human connections are the most important when it comes to resisting and fighting against a regime like this. And you do see that, for example, in the white paper revolution that happened last year, they actively tried to limit the communication people could have across different cities and different towns inside of China. And that's why I think, you know, it's the common tactic from them. And it's more important than ever that we stay connected, that we know what each other is doing and we try to, you know, seize every opportunity to really utilize the entire diaspora to make change. And that's why, for example, this year we're organizing the Hong Kong Summit again, as it happened last year in the US and also in the UK. And, you know, for example, right now, the diaspora in the US has been pushing for the Bar John Lee campaign. Essentially, we're trying to use every single opportunity we can use to demand the United States government to not let John Lee enter the United States for the APEC meeting this November. And the same has happened, you know, with many other campaigns, such as, you know, reporting on Hong Kong police who are overseas, for example, actually initiated by Ted and, you know, Finn as well. So, and also, you know, for example, diaspora media platforms that many Hong Kongers have started, for example, the Points by Finn. And these are important initiatives from the diaspora that really need supporting from people around the world, because I think right now we're also expanding the concept and idea of what is being a Hong Konger. Is no longer something geographically defined, but more it's defined by political ideology of wanting freedom and yearning for democracy. And that, I think, is the biggest weapon we have really against the regime. And it's something that we must hold on to.
Yeah, thanks. Let me go to our final question that I have, and then we'll turn to some audience questions. So what's the most important thing that lawmakers in open democratic societies can do to support the people of Hong Kong, whether it's people like you in the diaspora or Hong Kongers? And I should say one of our audience questions is very similar, which isn't just lawmakers, but what can people in free societies do to support Hong Kongers in Hong Kong, as well as Hong Kong activists? So let me go to Ted first, if I could.
Yep. So parliamentarians and people of free countries, they have the power. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of social capitals. And I hope that they look at Hong Kong not just as a region or, if not a country, but a nation that has its own political ideologies. They are freedom loving and they have Hong Kong spirits, human spirits. And don't think that helping Hong Kong is just for the welfare of Hong Kong. So it's about the world. It's about freedom in the world. So think of Hong Kong as a window through which you can see the real China, the nature of the CCP regimes. Then you will know what to do to stop, like what I said, the export of authoritarianism throughout the world. So in that sense, since now there's an exodus, so of people are moving out from Hong Kong and started living in different parts of the globe, try to make deeper connections with them in terms of building Hong Kongers civil societies, making Hong Kongers moving into the poor and order mainstream societies, and in parliaments, create Hong Kong friendly groups, informal groups, and have parliamentarians put up motions on Hong Kong's and private member bills, and support the ideas of sanctions over John Lee, over all those so-called high officials who are persecuting, Hong Kong, the Hong Kong diaspora and Hong Kongers every day, the human rights abuses. Think about speaking up for removing those highly respected retired judges from the UK, Canada, and Australia, ask them to refrain from serving Hong Kong's very, very eroded, manipulated CCP courts. And these are the very many examples through which they can help Hong Kong.
Great. Anna, do you want to take a crack at that question?
For sure. So I think the first thing, that should be done is actually to not let backsliding happen, even further. And by that, I mean, do not let John Lee set foot in America for the APEC meeting this November. I think it's just ridiculous how we are seeing the US government even considering giving John Lee a sanctioned human rights abuser, a sanction waiver just to attend the APEC summit. But then, when we talk about medium term to longer term solutions, or, not even solutions, but assistance the US governments can provide for Hong Kongers, the first thing is definitely to provide and offer humanitarian pathways for Hong Kong protesters who have fled from Hong Kong, as well as political prisoners who are going to be released eventually in the next few years and next several years. I think that is the basic thing the US can do. And when, the United States has affirmed their support for Hong Kongers many, many times over the years, I do not doubt that they're willing to stand with Hong Kongers, but I do want to see it in action, in concrete actions and methods, and offering humanitarian pathways is really the best way to go. And secondly, definitely the US administration should consider sanctioning national security judges and prosecutors. We have seen very clearly, actually, that the Hong Kong government is very aware and worried about the effects of these sanctions. They have actually gone as far as hiding information of certain prosecutors and judges. So I think it goes to show for them, they actually fear, the individual sanctions can pose a certain level of threat and pressure to certain, prosecutors in Hong Kong who do the dirty work. So if they have nobody doing the dirty work for them, the implementation just doesn't work. And I think that is, one of the things that the US government and other foreign governments can do, this multilateral cooperation to collectively sanction NSO judges and prosecutors. And thirdly is definitely for the US government to be aware of foreign operations and foreign influence conducted by the Hong Kong government. So for example, last week, 2 weeks ago, HADC actually released a report underlining the kind of counter-lobbying activities by the Hong Kong government here in DC. And that complemented really well with the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office Certification Act that is in Congress now. And as Mark said, it has went through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So now it's heading to the full Senate for a vote. And hopefully we can see more movement, in the House companion bill as well this year. And eventually we can see it, passing into actual law. But there's still, a lot of steps we have to take to really fully assist Hong Kongers. And that is definitely something the Hong Konger diaspora in the United States will keep fighting for.
Yeah. Finn, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I would want to emphasize on the Sino-British Joint Declaration again, because the UK government, so far, we haven't seen any kind of targeted sanction against Hong Kong senior officials, as well as the Chinese Communist Party, while the US government, they have been taking the lead in terms of targeted sanction. So that is somehow, I was, to be honest, disappointed to see that. And this is something that perhaps we should push even more. Right now, we have a petition organized or hosted by different people on the parliamentary website. And I encourage those who are living in the UK, no matter whether you're Hong Kongers, as long as you love freedom, you support democracy, then I'll urge you to help to sign this petition to the UK Parliament. On the other hand, well, I would say the underlying cause behind different sorts of maybe perhaps hesitant attitude towards containing China is because of our dependency on the Chinese market. Well, sometimes people may simply overestimate our dependency on the Chinese market. Taking the UK as an example, in 2022, our total trade volume towards China was just 6.5%. That means that we still have around 94% of the global market that we should take care of. So as long as we could diversify our market, reduce our dependency on the Chinese market, then perhaps it will untie our hands, using more diplomatic tools, more instruments to hold China accountable. So this is something that I would say this is a long-term solution.
Great. So we have actually just a few minutes for some questions, and I want to actually pair a couple of questions and then let people answer kind of how they like. A very interesting question from someone in Hong Kong about what those of us overseas, or what do we think the Hong Kong people who are still there can do, should do, and kind of a, I don't know, parallel question. Why do we think that the Hong Kong government and the CCP are so afraid of people, of their own people? I don't know who, maybe we'll go back to the order we did in the first round. I'll start with Anna on this. And you can answer one, you can answer both. Let's keep it pretty short because we are kind of coming to the end of our time.
Right. So for people who are still in Hong Kong, honestly, because I'm not in Hong Kong anymore, so I think even though I can logically understand, the risks that people have to take for all the actions, I still think, people who are living there can understand most and evaluate their situation the best. But I think as someone who has been advocating for Hong Kongers overseas, one thing I feel really motivated by is really seeing how Hong Kongers inside of Hong Kong still try to, chant slogans, go to the streets on June 4th, on June 12th, on July 1st, even though they were just taken, away by police, in seconds after they have, started saying something. Those scenes keep a lot of us going. I would definitely think that, and those scenes really give us a lot more reason to keep fighting for Hong Kong. And separately, I think it's also important to keep developing the cultural scene of Hong Kong. It's something that you see, the Hong Kong government actively trying to purge and actively trying to limit by, for example, introducing a lot of Chinese investors into, movies, music, these industries. But at the end of the day, I think it's these soft cultural products that can unite people, that can make people realize their love for Hong Kong, and that can nurture the future generation. So I think these are, some softer things perhaps Hong Kongers inside of Hong Kong can do. But I think most importantly, 2019, 2020, and the past few years were objectively traumatizing events for a lot of Hong Kongers. And I do know for a fact that a lot of Hong Kongers are still struggling with that trauma they have. So the most important thing is to take care of yourself, make sure that you are okay, and make sure that when the time comes, we are all well and motivated enough to seize it. I think that those are the things that, I would choose to tell Hong Kongers who are inside Hong Kong. But I think besides that, I do want to add one more point, because just now I forgot to also mention that I think for people around the world, people who are not inside of Hong Kong, and especially people who have political rights in their countries, it's important to exercise that. Hong Kongers are fighting for years just to get the political rights to, call our representatives to tell them, hey, you should support and get behind this bill. So when you do have the right, I really encourage you to utilize that political right to call your representatives, call your Congress members, call your parliamentary members, to tell them to support the legislations that are available to assist Hong Kongers. And that is one of the most concrete actions you can take to support our fight for Hong Kong's freedom and democracy.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Before I go on to Finn, I just want to underscore what you said about Hong Kong identity. And I think the CCP has done us a great favor in a way, because the sense of Hong Kong, Cantonese Hong Kong identity, but really multinational, multicultural Hong Kong identity has developed since 1997 in, historically unprecedented way. And so important to keep that in mind. It's soft, it's not directly political, but it's very, very important. So Finn, let me turn over to you. Can answer one or both of those questions briefly, I think.
Yeah. Well, the reason why the Chinese Communist Party of the Beijing regime is afraid of people is that, I would say, because all dictators, they are afraid of the majority, and people is the majority. Right now, we are facing different kind of transnational repression, and I hope that different sorts of events going on in Hong Kong, and even in other regions in China, say Tibet or other places, that could somehow turn transnational repression into transnational resistance. we need action from different national government, different democratic countries. So that will be the good opportunity that we could collaborate with each other. So time or history has told us that back in the 1980s or early 1990s, the USSR could suddenly collapse. And if we could again adopt a correct strategy, then I would say the history will repeat.
Yeah, thanks. And Ted, if I could turn it over to you, and I should tell our audience, we may go a few minutes late. We'll definitely wrap this up by 10. There's an additional question, Ted, you might want to take up, or others might, which is picking up on something Anna said earlier. It's a question, looks like from an overseas Chinese, but a PhD candidate in Australia. How do we maintain unity and human connections in our advocacy for Hong Kong? So Ted, you can answer any or all of these questions.
Yeah, I think the Hong Kong identity that you highlighted and Anna highlighted is really, really important in a way that I don't want people within Hong Kong to risk their liberty, their personal safety to do anything that can be so-called illegal in Hong Kong, but still maintaining and promoting the Hong Kong spirit, the Hong Kong identity is still legal. For example, it's still legal to chant, "I'm a Hong Konger." It's still legal to chant that we are Hong Kong. So in different cultural ways, in popular cultures, acknowledge Hong Kongers' suffering starting from 2019. And that way, people within Hong Kong and all over the globe will see each other. The problem of Hong Kong in the current situation is that there's no protest. There's no political activism. So Hong Kongers can't see if each other, we are still fighting. There are still comrades alongside fighting with me. But through these promotion of Hong Kong identities and through popular cultures, to make us see each other, to make the international community see Hong Kong spirits are still high. That's why we are deserve of any assistance. And I think that's definitely one way to do it. And the reason why the China Hong Kong CCP regime is so afraid of us, it's not because only the 8 of us. It's afraid of the people in general, because after decades of brainwashing, after decades of threatening and infiltrating, it couldn't change Hong Kongers' love for freedom and democracy. That's why at 2019, it was almost a tip-over point that it might risk its state power, the power to govern the regions, to kill all dissents. That's why an authoritarian government is so afraid of the people, because they will lose power when people are persisting.
Great. Thank you. I noticed in the comment there is someone who basically says we shouldn't even bother. The dragon has arisen. Nothing we can do. So I want to give everybody a chance to make some final remarks. But I think that this is an important issue to take on, because, yeah, we work hard, but China is the second most populous country in the world, second largest economy, and seems to be unstoppable. So I'll start with you, Finn. I mean, make some closing remarks, but maybe particularly take on that issue as well. Is resistance futile? Are we crazy? Or, do we sort of say, I don't give a damn, as Ted says, and we just keep fighting, and we figure that historical circumstances will work in our favor of it someday? Finn.
Yeah, we are certainly crazy in that if we take a time machine going back to 1970s or 1960s, if you told people that the USSR, another superpower, would collapse suddenly, then people would certainly say you are crazy. So that's why I would say we are certainly crazy. But, well, I'm a rather pragmatic person. So that's why I have been focusing on advocating how to reduce our dependency on the Chinese market. This is the fundamental reason why we are tying our hands, why we could not carry out different targeted sanctions against Hong Kong senior officials, or even the Chinese Communist Party itself. So I would say that's our top priority. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, is that we have to turn transnational oppression into transnational resistance, because this is I would say, golden opportunity for all of us, for different people in different countries, to realize the threat of the Chinese Communist Party could place upon a people, that is the Hong Kong people, as well as those peoples around the world. Yeah, so I would say that's all from me today.
Yeah. Ted, some final remarks?
My final remark would be for Hong Kongers to stay brave, not in a reckless way, not going to jail, but then stay really, really tough. And think about the bounty over our heads. Today it's on the head of 8 of us, and tomorrow there will be more bounties on many people's heads. So people will be refrain from doing this and talking about those, but don't let that happen. That's the aim, the ultimate goal of China. We don't fall into it. We continue to speak up. We continue to contribute to our respective countries while the Hong Kong diaspora is overseas. And so we show the world that we are deserving of help, that we are still here. So yeah, be tough and be brave, Hong Kongers.
Yeah. Anna.
Yeah, so I do understand, and I do feel sometimes as well, even now, that, as an individual, it can be very intimidating and overwhelming to think that you are yourself fighting against arguably the biggest regime in the world. But then I do have to think, we do have to put things into context, right? That change is always the only constant in history. We have seen, for generations that things always change, dynamic of, countries, of people, and also how regimes definitely, come and go, they fall. So I think we do have to hold on to that faith and hope that one day the Chinese Communist Party is going to have its downfall. The problem is, though, how do we seize that opportunity, and whether we're willing to accept the fact that, even when that change happens, it might not happen during our lifetime. But as long as it happens to future Hong Kongers, as long as the identity of Hong Kongers can stay, I think it's worth the fight. And I think, it's also a question for everyone. Are you willing to wake up every day thinking and knowing that your home is collapsing, but you're not going to do anything about it? I don't think most people would be willing to say yes. And that's enough of a reason for us to fight on. And that's enough of a reason for us to fight on, even though we know perhaps the change we want to see is not going to happen, when we're still alive. But still, we're fighting for a better tomorrow, and that starts from today. And that's why I think we all should keep fighting, even though there's a lot of fear. We just have to overcome that fear, learn to live with that fear, and we'll come out alive and we'll be fine in the end.
Hey, thanks. So well said. Let me kind of summarize what some key points I think the three of you just made in this. If your home's on fire, if it's collapsing, if your friends are in jail, you got to do something. I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's pragmatic, but it's also the morally right thing to do. Economically, I mean, I think Finn particularly talked about the need to kind of re-risk, de-risk. And I think that's, the pandemic showed us that China's an unreliable supplier that will do things not only for its own purposes, but it's for its own narrow, selfish political purposes. We're seeing this with rare earths. So China's helping the world wake up to the threat that it poses. And getting back to the question from the audience, why is China so afraid? Well, I mean, the fact that China is working so hard to repress people like the three of you and the 8 people that have bounties on them, and really, the entire diaspora, the entire Chinese resistance movement, the fear that China has, I think it shows that, people like us, those of us who are working for a freer, more open Hong Kong and China really do pose a threat to China, because most people actually don't want to be slaves, and they don't like the kind of surveillance state, the technologically enabled communist repression, which is the Chinese model. I mean, the world doesn't want that. And I think we will do what we can. As Anna said, we may or may not live to see success, but it's the right thing to do. It's a pragmatic thing to do. And, I believe that we will prevail. I remember the Berlin Wall coming up. I lived in Berlin. Never thought I'd see the Berlin Wall coming down. And there's a whole generation of people, my children, who don't even know that the Berlin Wall existed almost, except through history books. So we're doing the right thing, and we will get there with a bit of help from all of our people who work with us. And one of the things that we want to do is kind of empower people through a letter campaign that's modeled on something that supporters of the Nobel Peace Prize winner Liu Xiaobo worked on about 15 years ago when he was arrested. A campaign started that said, if he's guilty, we're all guilty. All of us who support Liu Xiaobo, all of us who support freedom are guilty. And so we are starting a campaign. We have an open letter. I don't know if this has been put up in the comments group or not, but it's an open letter. We invite people to sign it, expressing their solidarity with those who have bounties. And we're starting a hashtag campaign. I am guilty too. So we'd love to get the support of everyone watching this and your networks to do that. So I want to close this out. We're a few minutes past when we said we'd go, but I hope everybody's agreed that this extra 10 minutes has been worth it to talk about these important issues. I want to particularly thank my three panelists here, Anna Kwok, Finn Lau, Ted Hui from the United States, from England, and from Australia, which I think shows the worldwide reach of the activist Hong Kong diaspora. So thanks, everyone. Please continue to follow us and the organization, the work that each of these people do. You can get our Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation weekly newsletter. Follow us on Twitter at the CFHK, and stay in touch and keep up the good work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.